Hello, Ben. How are you doing today?
Hello, Andrew. I'm all right.
Yeah,
Friday. Happy
yeah, it's
Friday.
fun. Thank you. Happy Friday to you as well. It's going to be a weekend starting tomorrow because it's Friday today. This is From A to B, presented by Osmo.com. I'm Andrew. This is Ben. We're going to talk about sports with you. Football's back. That happened last night.
It did. Yeah, it was I thought I was gonna miss the start. I was out, but lightning prevented that, and then it's a pretty ugly game. It really was.
Yeah, not
I'm
pretty.
I'm glad consolation. I was really close to betting the Falcons. Like them to win that game. I would have been pretty upset because they certainly should have. They had their chances.
Yeah, I was kind of on the Falcons too. Nick Foles, not very good.
Not
Um,
the best.
Nope. Really struggled last night. Uh, the refs really struggled last night. I
A lot of
always
flags.
forget how boring it is to watch like a single football game. You know, when you're in midseason form and just grinding red zone Sunday, watching one game at a time. Lot because I watched it live and it just there's so many commercials, so many penalties. People are just I don't know. It's a
It's
it's a
really
weird sport. It's a
Yeah, no,
weird
it can
sport.
drag. I mean, you know this. I don't mind like pretty ugly games, but even that, it dragged. It was sloppy. I mean, you can expect that it's first game, but my God, the Falcons, it's the same old story. Like, just figure it out in the red zone.
Yeah, I will say you and I spent a fair amount of time tilting last year on play. Like I played a lot of Julio. There was one week where Julio did the Mark Leishman last year, where he only had like two or three massive games, but it was when he was 50% owned. Uh, and I remember being really annoyed a bunch of times when it's like, oh wow, Julio is a nice price and he's not popular this week. Why won't they just throw it to him on every single down? He's bigger and stronger than everyone else out on the field. And then they were kind of doing that last night, but then they gassed him before they got into the red zone, so he had to come out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's unbelievable. It's not even that the volume's not there for him. Like he got his, in a big game. It's just the way they go about it. It just seems so inefficient. It's like, oh, let's throw him six straight, and then it's like, stagger it, figure out a way. And even if you don't want to use him, just have him out there. Especially in those red zones, I didn't understand the first drive when they marched down the field. I'm not saying you got to give him a look there, but he's got to be on the field to at least make that an honest play. They just jumbo formation that was just stupid. Uh, but one game. It's a long season for both those teams. We'll say.
Oh yeah, yeah. It didn't go great for showdown for me either, just because I don't know. Like I played a lot of Julio. Obviously, Julio was clearly the optimal play, but in a giant winner take all millie maker, like I shorted him a little bit because he
Why
was
not?
the yeah, because why not for one, yeah. But he was also I bet he was the captain in like 40+% of lineups.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
in small, like higher stakes, small field, he was 100% owned in some things.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, I actually did
not
pretty good, so I was happy. I mean, it was one of those things. I seem to do this often. I had a couple of lineups in higher stuff, and I picked the right ones. So in the millie, yeah, they cashed for like $25, but in 300 man, they were up there. So that
yeah.
was fun. It's always fun to just take some gambles. And now we got a real slate coming up in a couple days.
We do. It's a big one. A lot of games. Last night we had the return of two fellas talking football, or it's going to be just I don't know, fellas talking football. Myself and Laffy did the show last night. Ben, you're going to be on it with us in the future.
It's true.
You and Laffy are going to do the Sunday countdown show this week leading up to lock. I think Josh and Jake are doing one as well. We'll have those going. So you'll have plenty of time to get in your full slate NFL takes. I did mine a lot last night. You can watch that. So I think today we'll talk more about college football people want to hear what you have to say about that, and so do I. I will listen because I don't know anything about college football, which is
Sure.
totally fine.
Couple.
One thing before we get to that. Why is the golf already over? Did they start early because of the rain or something?
I was going to bring that up. And real quick on NFL, we have an article. I wrote up some thoughts, article on the site, so you can check those out in addition to everything else. But the golf, yeah, it was beautiful. I woke up and on the Golf Channel there was actual golf, which is a rarity. They pushed it up for storms, and they really pushed it. I mean, they were going off split tees with 70 dudes, so it went really fast. Kind of nice, honestly. I mean, there's no cut, so you didn't really have to worry about today. Friday's not exactly a big day unless there's a cut, but it was interesting. Did you catch any of it?
Not really. I mean, I have a ton of Jason Day, so excited about that. Saw he had a monster day. I'm in much better shape than I was yesterday. So played a little bit of Xander in life. That's never really happened for me before.
Which is, it's nice to get him finally where this is what people talk about when they claim he's good. I've rarely experienced him being good. Spieth was bad. That hurt, but Fleetwood got back in it. And this is what you're going to see. I mean, you can make up so much ground when you can go low. And clearly here, 62, 63 is, it's not that it's out there. It's going to happen. So a couple of those, you're going to see guys who are nowhere right now surge into the top something. And that's going to make for interesting weekend. That's for sure.
Not question from the chat. Assertion from the chat from our old nemesis, Ags Carnage, AGS.
Oh, wow.
Says if you didn't play 100%, if you didn't play Julio in 100%, your tout card should be revoked. I don't think so.
I don't.
There's a good reason to
I
not
did
play
all the Julio, but that's not anything of value. It's a showdown slate. Honestly, barring doing something just illogical, I don't think there's anything that I would say is a bad idea.
No, in showdown, it doesn't make a lot of sense you can't do what everyone else is doing, or you're just going to split everything with everyone else. So it was a bit of a gamble, but think about how many games. Julio's median game is not all that special. His ceiling game is impressive. His average game, but he's one of those guys where his median game is much lower than his average game because his explosive outputs really drag the mean up, the average. But his median game is it's more than half likely that he wasn't going to go crazy like that, and he was way more than half owned. So I feel pretty comfortable about the fade.
Showdown. Anyway, one game. It could have ended 9-3, and it would be defense, kicker, and like Sproles.
Yeah. And what it was defense, kicker, and Julio. Julio was the only person. And Ajayi stumbled into the end zone twice, but that helped. Got a 2-point conversion.
Yeah, and the 2-point conversion. So lucky. Yeah, I was surprised. I know we're not going to talk a lot of football, but we'll see how the game unfolds. He really didn't command really a workhorse load or anything. He found the end zone, but I was kind of surprised about that. I thought they would lean on him pretty heavily, and they didn't. He got going there, and obviously he found the end zone, so he salvaged the game, found it twice, but it was not in terms of the touches what I thought we were going to say.
12 rushes for 50 yards with 0 catches. That's very bad if you don't find your way into the end zone a couple times.
It was
only played about, I forget what it was, 30-something% of the snaps. Saw a report somewhere, but yeah, not great.
Did you see, and then we'll get to college football, I promise, but I would have to mention, thought Rory was going to shoot like 56 yesterday at one point. I don't know if you were watching that. When he was 9 under through it was either 13 or 14. Hitting it, he finally had fixed his wedges, which needed fixing. Today it went back.
Was just like going crazy with the putter though.
He was making a lot of 8 to 12 footers. It wasn't absurd stupid putts. I'll say that. He had a ton of looks. It also, his strokes game putting got dragged down a little because he missed a couple easy ones. So you are right about that. He did make plenty of putts. It was refreshing to see those wedges though. We had talked about a million times with him. It's great that you can hit it 350 dead straight and have 80 yards left. if you hit it to 35 feet, it's not useful at all. So today he was not great, but we'll see. Now everyone is just bunched with him. There's a million guys up there.
Yeah, we don't know anything yet.
No.
It's going to be a wild weekend.
Bill's not going to win. That's what we know.
No. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's talk about some college football, man. We got a bunch of games tomorrow. You've been looking at them. You know what's going on? TCU.
That's tonight. Yeah, that's
all right.
That's a game, but not really. If you're playing tonight, I mean, again, it's a showdown slate. TCU is going to score a lot of points. SMU is going to score significantly less points. I don't think we really need to delve into that too much. But yeah, how do you want to do this? You want to run through like quick notes on each game? You want to just talk about the slate?
It's up to you. I guess we can do some quick notes on each game. The one that stands out to me, obviously, is the Arizona-Houston game. That looks monstrous. That's going to be the massive chalk, I would imagine, but for good reason. It's got a 71 over-under, pretty tight spread. Your boy, Aaron Donald 2.0, playing for Houston.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we just start there? You want to do that? I mean, let's do it. Honestly, you just talked about it. 71 total, spreads around a field goal. Arizona, I thought they would be better. It's been one game, disappointing loss. Going into Houston, and first thing to know, Arizona, Khalil Tate, who's their quarterback, super electric, can really move. A lot of people are talking Heisman talk. He started off as bad as you can start, so he's going to need some big games there. Other than that, though, I mean, it's a team where you kind of look and I don't know what else. He's such a polarizing thing. It's similar to Louisville last year with Lamar Jackson, where, of course, there's some other weapons around him, but he just commands so much of the offense. I mean, he's throwing it, but he's a threat in the red zone to run it. Obviously, he's scrambling all the time, so it does take away from, certainly the running back. And the receivers, they don't have a true pocket passer back there. So in game stacks and whatnot, I have no problem, pairing him up with someone like Tony Ellison, who's probably their best receiver. But honestly, it's not something where I think it's an easy pairing where it's like, all right, if Tate gets his, I know Ellison's getting his. I don't think that's the case. You could really run him solo. Obviously, you're paying a steep tag, 10-4 for Tate, but someone I'm definitely going to look to.
Okay, fair enough. So Ellison is your favorite to pair him with, or are there other ones? Anything sneakier or
not for me? I mean, I think it's just a situation where I'm not going to try to force that in. There's just it's a big slate. There's plenty of games. I don't see much, and then. You look at the other side of the game, you got Houston. They played Rice, which is just they're really bad. Put up some points, also let up some points. And that's why I think we see this total that way. I'm fairly confident that Houston's going to be able to move the ball relatively easy. And Arizona's certainly going to be able to. So it could be some fireworks. King, who's the Houston quarterback, not a guy that I honestly know that much about. He does have a little rushing. He ran one in last week. Had a pretty efficient game, but he's also pretty expensive. He's hovering around 10K. Not really looking to go there. Much more interested kind of in the skill positions. They have, like most teams, some running backs. Patrick Carr stands out. Only had a handful of carries against Rice, but I think you can lean on him a little. He's only 4,800. Then you got some receivers over there, whether it's Lark or Stevenson. Again, their numbers look really good because they just bombed Rice. I'm not saying we see that, but they're at playable prices, both under 7K. I think they just make pretty standard, options. No one where I'm jamming them in, but some reasonable targets in a game, which is to be expected when the total's 71.
Yeah, should be plenty to go around, you would think. So I can see going with as much of this game as you can possibly get in, I think that's going to be a popular strategy, but
Yeah,
certainly makes sense.
It's one of the games.
Any
I was just gonna say it's clearly the game, where it's easier to stack just because it has up and down. There's a lot of games that have a big total, but 80% of it's going to come from one team. It's not the best way to stack it, obviously. This is one where both teams are very live to put up a boatload of points.
Yep. That makes sense. Another game that seems to have some potential for that is the Georgia Tech versus South Florida game. Georgia Tech's one of the teams that doesn't throw the ball, right? So there's 25 running backs that are in play.
Yeah, so they run a triple option, which is just, it's really atypical, I'm sure, to game plan for, especially early in the year. These teams, when you're running spring practice, maybe they devoted a little time to this because they knew they were playing Georgia Tech, but on the whole, they're not used to seeing that. And you see it all the time in these games. Not that this is super useful for DFS, but you do see it. The cornerbacks, they feel like they're not involved and they cheat and they start leaning. And then, of course, one big 70 or 80-yard pass because they're just not expecting it. They're trying to get involved in the run and whatnot. And Georgia Tech, it's kind of bizarre. They seem to always they've got a long list of really, Calvin Johnson went there. So they've had some monster receivers, which you wouldn't think. Stephen Hill, who he was awful for the Jets, but in college he was really good.
I remember him.
Yeah. So that's kind of how they attack. This quarterback from, I don't know that much about him, Marshall. He seems capable as a passer. Their goal is to not pass, though. If they're behind, you're going to see that. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case here. They're a pretty good team. South Florida, not super high on as a whole this year. So I think you can look to them. It's just a matter, you talked about it, when you run that kind of thing, they've got a million guys who are seeing a boatload of carries. And that makes it tough because, you need them to succeed, of course. But it's not just that. You got to get the right one who's going to find the end zone. There's a million candidates, including the quarterback. I mean, he's clearly one of the guys they look to on the ground last week. Let's see. 9 carries, 77 yards, and a touchdown. But they played Alcorn State, which is not, a school that can compete with them. I would expect double-digit carries for Marshall. And then if you want to go to the running back side, there's just a lot of guys. Benson and Mason, top 2. I think it's fine. It's just all of their ceilings are somewhat capped just because none of them see volume that you really want. You're not going to get 25 carries from any of these guys. Maybe they all take 12, maybe they take 15. You find the end zone twice, probably a pretty nice game, but it's tough on that front. And then you had talked about this with Ajay just before. None of these guys really catch many balls, of course, so they don't get the luxury of padding the stats with 4 catches, 20 yards. That's an extra 6 points. That's huge when you're 6K.
Yeah, no, that's a massive deal. You definitely need that in the NFL. Do they specialize even more in college? Is that a thing or?
Not really. Really good teams, if they have depth, they'll mix and match. They'll have some guys, but a lot of these, even middle tier teams, they just don't have that many guys that they want to use, and they're mostly interchangeable. They don't have guys who specialize in pass catching per se. Of course, there are some. But you just have a lot of backs in college who they don't have good hands. It's pretty atypical. And then on the flip side, there's a handful of backs who are almost receivers. They have like 8 catches a game, and they can really rack up the points.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. So, some specialization. D Kiefer 19 guy I see a lot. I've talked to a lot in Slack. Good guy. No idea how to pronounce that name. Demarius Thomas, also a Georgia Tech person.
There you go.
Wide receivers. So, yep.
I think it was the third. Couldn't think of it. Yep.
Nice call.
And it's just more weird than anything because, you think, why would they really want to go there? Maybe even your dog is very, very wondering about that. And I don't know. It's interesting, but they've always had a legit monster on the outside, and it's super useful because it doesn't take that many bombs. If you can break one or two of those a game, of course you'll be in good shape. But
or just even the threat of that opens it up for everyone else underneath.
exactly,
That's a big thing too. Another part of whatever, just to on a macro level, this spacing concept that I think everyone's pretty familiar with in the NBA is really similar in the NFL, where you need these sort of groups of receivers or in football in general, where it's really helpful to have sort of groups of receivers that fit together well. You know, you want someone that's super fast that can stretch out the defense. That's like your sort of 3-point shooter type. And then you want someone who can be a bit of a post presence and, you know, get the nice possession receiver. And then you want the safety valve slot outlet. So you want those things to mix together like that. And having a huge wide receiver that can run down the field and attract attention is never going to hurt you, even if you'd much rather run the ball.
No, it's true. And I think, again, more in college, you see not perfect situations because a lot of teams don't have, you can't build a roster. You know, you're recruiting, it's a little different. So there are holes. And then just real quick, I'll talk about South Florida. So their quarterback, they lost Flowers, who last year was a monster, really mobile. Brought in the Bama transfer, Barnett, who's, I don't know, I wasn't overly high on him. He looked really good last week. He's really prototypical pocket passer. So they're going to be attacking, you know, in a traditional way. He's not mobile. You can look right to these receivers. They played Elon last week, which, again, hard to take what you saw there for anything. Georgia Tech is certainly not Elon. McCants is their best receiver. I know if you look at the points per game, you have this Felix dude he's a freshman. Again, maybe he sticks. Maybe he certainly looks like he's in the mix, but McCants is the guy I think you see in bigger games with the majority of the target share. So I have no problem pairing them up or just singling one of these receivers and hoping that, you know, you can get lucky. And if they're behind, you're going to see them throwing. You know, in terms of running backs, they didn't really do much on the ground. Elijah Mack had 10 carries, which pretty decent volume at 4,400. I'm not sure how much I'm looking for that as a whole. I think that with Barnett at quarterback, you're kind of going to see them air it out a little more this year. It's such a radical change. And again, you don't see this in the NFL. They're going from Quentin Flowers, who was super mobile, super, you know, electric, to Barnett, who's, you know, a statue back there. I don't think we're going to be seeing too many long runs for him. So it's kind of a whole change in itself. Charlie Strong, he's just, I don't like the way he calls plays, but we'll see what that offense can do. This is definitely an interesting game, and another one, total of like 60-ish, pretty good one to attack.
Yeah. Sounds like a good one. And I think it will be, I would imagine it's significantly less popular than the Arizona-Houston game. Pretty easy script to follow, right? You get the Georgia Tech running backs, hope they get up big, and then South Florida has to throw a million passes to get back in it. Makes sense. Yeah. Any other games you like, or any other, you know, not even a game, maybe any other one-offs you're into? What else do you got?
So a guy that I can just tell if he's on slates, I'm going to continue to play him. It was only 1 week, but the Duke quarterback name's Daniel Jones. I honestly am just more stunned that his price is not at a different level to start. He's 7,200, which of course is not cheap, but for me, he's a legitimate, really, really good player. Mobile. He had 10 carries last week, 43, found the end zone. They'd like to run him back there, or when they're close to the end zone. You know, a lot of quarterback draws, keepers. 13 of 17 for a touchdown. Pretty efficient against Army. They kind of dismantled that game. Army's one of those teams, triple option. They had some trouble running it. Not that that's pertinent. Now he goes to Northwestern, who, solid team, but they're nothing I'm overly worried about on the defensive side. Pretty weak, actually, I think, in the secondary, and I think that's going to open him up. So, you know, you have the luxury, if you can afford it, to play two quarterbacks, or even if you just want to use him, you could load up. You're sacrificing not getting the Tates of the world, but that's a guy at 7,200 I'm pretty comfortable with. I expect him to play well, and I think that he's just such a big part of the Duke offense. It's hard not to look at a guy who's a threat in the red zone and is basically involved on all their big plays.
Yeah. Do you
Um,
like any receivers or backs to pair him with? I know he runs a lot. Are you trying to play him solo more?
um, Probably, to be honest, TJ Rahming is the guy if I do pair him. He's sub 6K now. I paired him up against when they played Army, and he was fine. Saw not 5 targets, had 5 receptions. Pretty quiet game overall. It was nothing crazy, but they get him involved. I think that's his go-to guy at this point. I just again, when you're a threat like that, and the team likes to go to you in the red zone, it's just so valuable because of course, if it's a big play and he's thrown it, you're getting those points. But if that's where they're looking, near the goal line, you can just rack up so many points. And if you vulture a couple touchdowns, it's huge, of course.
That is absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, some of these other games, I'm definitely just gonna really, maybe try to pick a play here or there, see what fits, what doesn't. It's not. I guess it's similar to NFL. I mean, you guys were talking last night about stuff. And just the way I do it, I try to get my core and then mix and match. I always am going to have a play or two on. I don't love every play on my roster. It's just a couple guys where I say if they can just do their job, not kill my team, the rest of these guys I think have a ceiling, have the upside to really get me there. So yeah, the last guy, and then we can certainly talk a little more about the slate if you have any questions and whatnot. And we do have our hopefully it will become a tradition, our Friday Q&A. We'll get to that, but I did want to talk about Nick Fitzgerald. So he's the quarterback for Mississippi State. Really good player. Mobile, just good. Plays in the SEC. So the defense he sees in the conference is as tough as it gets. He was suspended last week. I don't know exactly what he did, but he did not play, and he is back this week. They are at Kansas State, who struggled last week. They got a win, but it was against a very bad opponent. And this guy is really good. So he's expensive. I'm interested to see if he goes under owned, just because, if you look, he did not play last week, so you would have to know who he is. Obviously, people do, but he has, as much upside as anyone, and he's a name you're going to see through the whole year. Could be a finalist for the Heisman. Mississippi State could be a good team this year. I have no doubt that they can compete with most of the SEC. Obviously, the Bamas of the world are in a different class. So he's a guy, if I can afford it, I don't mind taking a stab at 10-2. You want to pair him up. It's a little tricky. I think it's kind of a roulette situation. They got a lot of guys. It's a pretty unproven receiving core. They like to kind of keep it on the ground. So for me, I have no problem singling him. Any of these mobile quarterbacks, I think you can get away with singling because the true upside, you've talked about this before, the nuke upside comes from his legs. It's not, you can't really throw enough to crush it. He needs a $150 and 2 on the ground to just end the slate, and he can get there. Yeah. So that's one guy I think if you're scrolling and you're looking at points per game or whatnot, he's not going to show up, but definitely a guy worth taking note of.
He needs Darren Sproles back.
Darren Sproles, he a Kansas State alum, which we were just talking before the show how it seems that he was at Kansas State 30 years ago, which is not that far off because Darren Sproles has been in the NFL for a long time, and he's still doing it. He looked pretty good last night.
He's a good player, and a lot of running backs tend to have pretty short careers, but that's Sproles has never been that sort of between the tackles guy, and he also just backed up LT for 6 or 7 years, so didn't get a ton of wear and tear on his body because that was back in the days when they would still give the lead guy 300 carries a year.
Yeah, Frank Gore is the obvious super anomaly.
Yeah, that is strange. There's not a lot of 35-year-old dudes that stayed around for 12 years just running like that.
That's what I'm saying. He's certainly not Sproles, and he's doing it. Yeah. So the rest of the slate, there's multiple blowouts, which we touched upon either yesterday or Wednesday. I don't even remember. It's all a blur. Those are tricky. I think the easy way to sum them up, if I want to group them, don't stack the game. There's no reason to do that. If you want to take a stab at one guy, and especially if he's lower cost, and say, you know what, even if he only sees 3/4, I can live with that. I don't mind that. Someone's going to get there. It's just, again, you got to hope you don't get unlucky. Oklahoma was a perfect example. Last week, they were just rolling, and if your guys didn't get one of those long touchdowns at the beginning, you're kind of out of luck because they completely took their foot off the gas. Kyler Murray didn't see the field, and he wasn't overly involved in those big plays, so he did nothing, and that was a killer. Are they going to continue to blow teams out like that? I don't know. I mean, that was impressive, but I think that was more Florida Atlantic being one of the worst tackling teams I've ever seen. Lane Kiffin didn't really prepare that defense for sure, but you can look to those guys. Hollywood Brown on the outside, huge ability, super fast, super good. Just got to hope he gets his early, because the later it goes, the less they're going to be throwing.
Yeah.
You're going to like that guy, by the way.
Which guy?
Hollywood Brown. They got a receiver. He's really good. Going to be a good pro.
I mean, that's a cool name.
Cool name, yeah. That's all that really matters.
Yeah, indeed. Why is there a reason? Is it like a bridge too far that like we're gambling on college sports again for DFS, but they won't let the military schools on the slates? What is going on with that?
What?
None of them are on this, right? There's like, I mean, they're all playing tomorrow, Air Force and Navy, but they're not on the slate.
I don't know. Army was on the slate last week, so
okay.
It's weird too, because Navy would have been a great game. Them and Memphis are playing, and it's going to be a wild one. Like Memphis can't stop the run, Navy can't stop the spread, and that's what both of those offenses do. So maybe I'm sure DraftKings will launch a late slate for the late games. Maybe some of those will be on there and whatnot, but I haven't seen anything on that. I'm obviously focusing on this main slate, which is, it's the 12 p.m. games up to the 3:30. Ends with Georgia and South Carolina, which, again, not a great game to target, but I think it's going to be a really good game to watch.
Yeah. I'm echoing again. So, any other?
Got those echoes? Yeah, I get that sometimes too. Not off the top of my head, to be honest. I'm going to be in Slack. I think when I start to build, I'll see kind of ranges that I'm going to need to hone in on, because unlike the NFL, and it'll become clearer, but it's only week 1. There's hundreds of guys on these teams. So it's like, there's so many plays to go through that for me, I pick the guys that I feel confident on, and then I'll target it and say, okay, I'm going to probably have to find a receiver in this range. Let me hone in and see who's viable. Because if you just go through team by team, I know for me, I just end up I see things and you deviate from what you're really trying to do. With so many options, so many blowouts, there's just too many guys. So I'll stick to some of the key games and the key guys that I know about, and then work in mixing and matching.
Yep, I think that makes a lot of sense. So come around. Ben will be in our Slack channels tomorrow before everything's going down. That was
and it'll be good because I am headed to New Jersey, so I'll be able to enter maybe the late slate, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, you're going to the draft. What's the DraftKings thing this weekend?
Yeah, so they're having they did it last year in Boston, kind of just like a opening week thing. So if anyone watching is going, let me know. You'll see me there. I look pretty much the same as I do right now. So we'll say it should be fun.
It's true.
It's true. Yeah, you've seen me in person.
I've seen you in real life. Yeah, you look like that.
Same, likewise. Yeah, so I am looking forward to it. It should be fun. Put some names to some faces, and it is a nice little added bonus that you could play college football DFS there. So that will make it easy. And maybe I'll try out the sports app.
Yeah,
Lay
that'll be fun.
125 on both sides.
Yeah, that should. Oh my god.
Yeah.
They invited me to that one in Boston last year. That was like the first time they'd ever invited me to anything. I remember being kind of like annoyed because I've played. I'm not a massively high volume player, but I can't see the $3 contests anymore. Like I played quite a bit in my day, and they had that big kickoff in Miami a few years ago. I remember being really irritated I couldn't go to that because that was when they were super flush with cash. It's like, why didn't I go?
Yeah,
and then they invited me to the one in Boston last year. I'm living outside of San Francisco, and they're like, "Do you want to come to this? Like, you have to pay for your own way to get there." I was like,
"That's
no,
yeah, it's right in my backyard, so that makes it pretty easy to do." I'll keep you posted.
I've also been invited to 3 different San Francisco Giants games since I moved to LA.
They can't seem to connect the dots with you.
Nope, they really can't. Anyway, that's how it goes. That'll do it for college football talk, I think.
Yeah.
We're good there.
So, yeah, I just said this, but if anyone is going, certainly let me know. Love to have a drink, watch South Carolina beat Georgia. Anyway, now we got, which this is going to be this week, I'll just say this because we didn't do the poll questions because Monday was Labor Day and we didn't have a show. But starting next week, we will be posing a question on Mondays, putting a poll up, and then we will discuss the results of the poll on Friday. Also, we're going to be doing the Q&A on Friday, so I am excited to that. I might get a little something. Do you think we should go grab bag style with these questions, or should we just come right out with that?
It's up to you, man. This is your baby, so I'm going to let you drive here.
Okay, that's fair. We'll think about it. I mean, we have some time with the poll questions, but we did get some questions from the Slack. I'm just going to rattle them off here. First one is just real quick. This is more of a slate specific, so I won't spend too much time on it. It was just about Case Keenum this Sunday. I don't mind the Broncos in general. I like Demaryius Thomas. I think you can look to Keenum. I have no problem with that. Dalton's another guy that I'm pretty interested in at a similar price. So as we get closer to Sunday, I'll take a look at that for cash and in tournaments. But that's really my thoughts right now.
Yeah, I think Keenum's all right for cash. He's so cheap. There's a couple there. I like as of right now in my first build, I have Phil Rivers in cash, but I see the argument. Like will as I get closer and kind of figure this out more, depending on how much value opens up. If I really want one more stud piece at running back or wide receiver, I think I'd be okay dropping from Rivers to Keenum.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's kind of what I really should have summed it up as. Right now, he's someone that's in the conversation for me. I haven't ruled him out by any stretch. As we get closer to Sunday, it may be kind of where I end up. Yeah,
I will say the one trouble with him potentially is like he is a bit of a high variance guy. He throws it. He'll take shots, and he can. So it could go really bad. And Seattle. Yeah, their defense isn't what it used to be, but I think you still have to respect it. So I'm not in love with it. Denver's still got offensive line problems. They've gotten better. I think the big thing for Denver, their offensive line was atrocious the last couple of years, and I think they'll be okay this year. Yeah, and that's a huge difference because it's like having the turnstile guys that tackle that they've had the last couple of years is just. That is very different than a guy that can't hold protection forever, like just giving your quarterback a chance to make a throw. But definitely. Yeah, I don't know. Because if you are dropping down, it's like Keenum, there's like Fitzpatrick, Dalton, like it's some ugly names. So
it's magic, baby. Yeah, got to go into the Superdome. That could be bad, but I'll be looking at him. There's no doubt. I always somehow end up with that guy. It's true. Just to reiterate what you're saying, when you've got offensive line issues to the point where it's just collapsed, it's almost impossible to have a functionable offense. And just improving to where they can run some type of plays. They can't, of course, have long play action, big drops, but if they can just keep it together a little, that's night and day from what we've kind of seen with teams. The Giants come to mind when Flowers was giving up like 10 sacks a game, it felt like, for a while there.
Yeah, Flowers. There was the guy I think one. Oh man, why am I forgetting this now? One of the Lions guys. He might have been into whatever. Yeah, there's some classic examples.
Yeah, that's a killer when you just it's a free for all. It paralyzes your whole offense. Anyway.
It absolutely does. Do you have thoughts on Cam Newton?
Thoughts on Cam Newton? Yeah, he's someone, and I think a lot of people are going to be into. Certainly, McCaffrey is going to be popular, but I am going to have some Cam, McCaffrey, Olsen pairings. I feel like he's almost under the radar somehow. Maybe that's off base, but I'm really into it.
No, I think that's true. It's because he's expensive, and I think people generally are comfortable paying. They prefer to pay down at quarterback. But Cam is one of those guys with he's one of those quarterbacks that can put up 40.
And again,
he can do it both ways.
Like,
yep,
he has a potential upside that many of the other quarterbacks can't get to. It's not like he's going to, but you know that if you take Brady, you're getting a zero besides passing. Now, he can still crush it, but that's just an added layer of upside with Cam. So,
yeah, I mean, the big issue for Cam is that he's not a very accurate thrower, right? So, like, he has problems with those dump offs. The sort of McCaffrey stuff those are not throws that he's good at, even when McCaffrey's wide open. But they've totally overhauled their receiving core. Like, they had Devin Funchess and Kelvin Benjamin. Like, Greg Olsen is faster than them. He was literally their fastest receiver that they had last year. Funchess and Benjamin are slow people. And they've which is a bummer because I get the idea of it, right? Like, Cam overthrows everyone, so they just get these massive people that you can't overthrow in theory. But I don't think that's really what they need. I think what he's really good at is throwing the deep ball. And they brought in, they have like Torrey Smith and DJ Moore, and I think those burner types are just more likely to give him success. He does a good job throwing the ball deep. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think it'll be fun to see how
and you mentioned that earlier, kind of with it's about building not every team is the same. You got to build around what you kind of have. And I agree. I think those weapons suit what Cam naturally wants to do a little better than what he had.
Right. And they've changed their offense a lot over the years. It's been weird. They did lose Norwell to the Jags, which bit of a bummer, but I think they'll be fine.
All right. Next question. So we're going to be bouncing around a little in this Q&A portion, but how often do you think, or do you use narratives when you're doing DFS golf?
You're asking me this?
Well, that's the question that we got.
0% of the time.
Okay. That's what I figured. Yeah. I mean, which I think is a pretty good answer.
I mean, it's probably not actually 0, but I am like about as anti-narrative as it gets. There's no statistical evidence that it works, even though there's plenty of anecdotal pieces where people can pull that, but that fails just as often as it's right. So
that's pretty much my answer. I will, if I find something and I cannot statistically prove it and I believe in it, I will certainly play it. But you just have to be cognizant. It is so easy to bias yourself of forgetting when it doesn't work and then saying, oh, this guy needed a win. I think the easiest example is when guys are on the line for the FedEx Cup. We've seen so many guys get in with a clutch round, and we've seen just as many be 124 and miss a cut and get bounced. So you want to be careful with that. If it's very close between two guys and there's a stark factor, it's something I look to. I don't mind that, but if it is, I think the better answer is kind of what Andrew said, as much as that pains me.
It's just it's not worth the trouble is the problem. Like, it's more because people really like narratives, because most people
narrative street, baby.
Well, most people that talk about sports aren't like scientists, so they don't have statistical evidence to back up their stuff, so they pick out little pieces of trivia and say
that's sounds like me. Yeah,
it just makes the ownership not worth it is all I'm saying. But
All right. Next question. We got two more. This is an interesting topic, and I think it's worth talking about. How do you, this golf in particular, but in any sport, how do you kind of get off tilt, or how do you react when, say, you have a really bad Sunday? Things don't break your way, you catch an injury, something unlucky. How do you not let that start bleeding into the next slate or whatever else you're doing?
I'm pretty comfortable taking a day off or just like not playing a slate. I'm not really a tilt enterer. I'm very rarely like, oh, I'm getting crushed. I need to go play
Double
more.
down.
Yeah, I'm not a double down. Part of it too is because like I don't follow narratives. I tend to avoid shock. I don't like I'm usually not doing well when other people are. Like I don't know. I'm much more of a I think about this in a long-term expected value kind of way. So like fading Julio last night. I knew that probably wasn't going to work, but the point is like if it and it's not like I faded him, I just came in a little bit under. I played plenty. But the point is more like in the when it does work, you can get massively paid off. And I just kind of look at it like that, which means I lose way more slates than I win. It's just when I do win, it's usually I get some I have some really big wins in my life. So but I'll go on, 3-month losing streaks. Like it happens. But I've also, won a lot of very large field tournaments. So it's I try not to tilt. It's hard to not, but it's scary. I go outside a lot. I live in California. It's sunny out. I have a very active dog. We go hiking. I try to do that sort of stuff. You can't get down on yourself too much. If it goes on for a while, like sure you can re-examine your process, but I try to not let an individual slate really bother me. What about you? You always skate out. You never get crushed. Like I always have, not often, but I will have slates where it's like, oh God, I just lost like 90%. And you can be just as wrong about the slate as me, but you skate out with like a 10% loss.
I certainly have had a couple horrible slates here, but I on the whole find a way to keep it within like 25% loss, which that feels like a win, especially when it's predominantly GP pay for sure. For me, it's the same concepts. Again, we talk about this theme of this show. Very different, but I kind of arrive at the same thing. I'm looking at it. I zoom out. That's what I do if I have a horrible slate. I zoom out and I say, well, how's my month been? And if it's been good, I say, okay, well, then this is just a blip within that month. It's a fine line between I consider myself pretty easy to put myself down, so I don't have a problem being like I am an idiot, not just screaming, well, that was a good play in theory. That's really all I try to do. I look back and I say, all right, was this unlucky or did I make a mistake? And if I made a mistake, for me, because I play within my means, I honestly feel better about it because I'm just like, well, I identified it and now I fix it. If it's unlucky, you just have to try to tell yourself long term, there's really no luck. You'll just smooth out like everybody else. Goes back to bankroll. If you have too short a runway, you're going to feel the heat a lot more and you're going to press, and that's going to be bad.
Absolutely. And I think that is kind of underrated. Like you and I are both fairly big nits when it comes to how much we're exposing ourselves. I think, I'm a lunatic in the actual tournaments I enter, but the amount of money I'm exposing at a given time is not a very large percentage of my bankroll. It's not going to be, I try to, I make it so that it's not a big issue if I get absolutely killed.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people struggle is, they win one slate or win a couple slates in a row, and then they just immediately go to a much higher buy-in. And, it's not necessarily the way to go, I don't think.
No, you got to just know what you're playing. And like, there's no right answer. Just when I buy into a Thunderdome or whatever it may be, that money, if I'm not prepared, if I'm not prepared to lose that money, I do not play. Like, and I'm just as aggressive as I would be in any other tournament. And that's important because if you go in there and you try to make a lineup that you think is going to do well because you don't want to lose the money, you're just going to be way too conservative. It's not what got you there most likely, and you're probably not going to come out too happy.
100% agree with that.
Last question, definitely the most important. Is pizza a top 10 food?
Are we talking utility or
What does that
like
mean?
taste here? Like how useful it is. Like if it was,
No, not
it might
useful.
not be one of the. Well, that's a different thing, man. We were talking about we had this death row meal
Oh,
talk a
yeah.
little bit where like pasta and red sauce, one of the most delicious pizzas, basically the same thing. Absolutely delicious, but it makes me, it doesn't make me feel good to eat it. I
Oh, I
don't
see.
feel well afterwards. Like pizza is probably not in the top 10. Like it would not crack my short list for desert island. You have to eat this for the rest of your life food. But yeah, it's definitely one of the top 10 like bites of things you can have to me.
I love pizza. New York pizza, obviously the best. So a little biased there, but I think that's a fair point. I didn't know where you were going with that, but you brought it back to a reasonable take. Is a top 10 food in my opinion, but yeah, if you encompass, I guess, the utility aspect of it, not as viable.
Yeah, it's not a particularly useful food. Like I remember, as a kid, I loved Taco Bell. Um, Still think it's probably delicious. Haven't had it in 10 years though, just because it makes me, it makes me feel awful. Like it's not a good feeling to eat it. So there's the I'm doing it now, and then there's the after effect. So
Fair.
yeah, pizza rules, dude. Absolutely, no doubt.
Real good slice. I'm gonna go have a slice right after this show.
Yeah, I'm kind of hungry too. That makes some sense. California, I will say, Southern California has good pizza now. The pizza in Northern California is a joke, dude.
I've heard it's bad.
So bad. There's just nothing. It's really not good. Not good stuff. That was good stuff talking to you though, man.
Yeah, no, it's been a fun show. We'll back at it. We got, shows Sunday, and when we'll be talking some NFL. I will be hopefully pending Hoboken's suitable, and then next week we'll be back at it. Monday, poll questions in addition to everything else that we got going on.
Indeed, and find Ben in our Slack if you want to talk about college football. You can find me too, and I'll say, where is that school located? Pardon me. Deadlift's also apparently going to the Georgia Tech USF game tomorrow, so
there we
have
go.
Fun with that, buddy.
We'll have a person on the ground.
Indeed, yeah, exactly. Inside info. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Josh, for producing. Ben, thanks for talking with me, and we will catch you all next time.